that the security of the country, he said, is of prime importance. He also, remember, goes on to say that we do not need lessons in humanity by the world. An almost clear stand there being taken by the centre when it comes to the entire debate of safety versus security. Even as I'm trying to connect with our colleagues to get you more details and the inside track of what really is that entire affidavit containing, what we can tell you is that the entire affidavit, remember, contains about 15 to 17 pages. This has been filed by the MHA, that is the Ministry of Home Affairs there, as was required. The centre there has filed that affidavit in the Supreme Court. Nalini and Rhythm both with us on the phone line to get you more details. And first to you, Rhythm, what can you tell us about this?
Soon we shall see what the court is going to say, but they are being very cautious in their stand. Even though an affidavit is ready, MHA officials are present in court. The additional Solicitor General who is appearing for the government, Tushar Mehta, all ready with his arguments with the affidavit. They are being very cautious in passing the affidavit. They don't want to be bound by anything because they are waiting for how the judges in the top court will view this. So even though an affidavit is ready, we already know the government stand is clear and we're seeing and anticipating what will happen today. But remember, the central government and various ministers have already said and expressed security concerns when it comes to the Rohingyas. So like the hashtag of Republic, it's security first here.
You know, Rhythm, that's important because, you know, the centre, in as many words, essentially has been saying that when it comes to the debate of shelter versus security, for them, the security of the country is of utmost importance. But yes, this is a tough balancing act that the government, remember, really will have to be doing also.
Oh, yes, absolutely, Deepti. And we do need to remember that that's exactly what the government is planning here. We need to remember that even as the central government has been keeping a close watch on this, there are some people who call themselves the saviors of humanity and they've been waving the humanity card all over here, whether it's Owaisi or others, who've been trying to politicize the issue. But the security concerns here have to be taken into concern, and that's what the government is really trying to express in the top court. While they are waiting for some action to happen, they're all ready with their action plan here. They've been cautious in their approach in the top court, but let it be known that the central government is very ready with an affidavit. They're only seeing for the right time on what they have to do here.
You know, that's again important, and this is another, input, Rhythm, that I'm just reading out that we've received from our colleague Nalini, who I believe is inside the court now, and she's telling us that the entire case is all set to come up now on the 3rd of November. Not sure if Rhythm is able to hear me, but Nalini, if you can hear us, what really happened in the hearing in the court? And you're telling us that the next hearing is slated for the 3rd of November?
Yes, Deepti. The central government has today filed the affidavit before the Supreme Court of India. And in fact, the next date of hearing is 3rd of October, when the case is about to come up for hearing, when the arguments on the affidavit that has been filed by the central government will come up before the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. In addition to that, we have a confirmation from the ASG himself, Mr. Tushar Mehta, that the stand taken by the government in the affidavit is the fact that whether or not to support Rohingya Muslims is an executive policy decision that needs to be taken by the government. And they've also pointed out in brief the kind of problems that can occur if the Rohingya Muslims are allowed to enter into India. That's what the ASG Tushar Mehta has officially told us on the record. Of course, a copy of the affidavit will be with us in just a few moments when we will be putting out all the details on Republic TV. But for now, what we know is on the 3rd of October, the case is going to come up, when the arguments on the centre stand on the entire Rohingya issue are going to be taken up by the Chief Justice himself. And after that, we also heard a lot of impleadment applications being made by people who came up before the court and clearly stated that they've been, in fact, fighting for this issue and working on this issue for the past 3 decades. And finally, the case has come up in the Supreme Court, and that's why it's important for them to be included as a party to the case. Of course, all the impleadment applications, Justice Deepak Mishra, who is the newly appointed Chief Justice, took into consideration, has said that he will be taking up all the applications on the next date of hearing, which is the 3rd of October.
You know, then this is important because somewhere we also heard that, sentiment being echoed by Kiran Rijiju Nalini earlier, who also spoke to us, and he essentially said that we don't need lessons in humanity from the world, because he says that we as a country have a fair bit of right to decide about our own security concerns, and it seems that security perhaps is the biggest premise of the entire affidavit that has been filed in the apex court now.
Absolutely, Deep. You are absolutely right. In fact, the government stand from the very beginning has been pretty clear that this is a security concern for the country, that Rohingya have a possibility of being a security threat to the country. So the stand in that has been pretty clear. But just last week, Deepti, what we saw was that an affidavit was almost filed in the Supreme Court, but at the last moment was taken back by the Ministry of Home Affairs, stating that they wanted to make some very pertinent changes to the affidavit, which is why they were taking back. What will be interesting to note is that what are these changes that the Ministry of Home Affairs has decided to make to the affidavit, because their initial stand that they were taking is that they were a security threat to the nation, and that's why this should not be allowed. Of course, there was a huge outrage regarding that. A lot of people have reacted almost instantly to it. And after that, we heard that the Ministry of Home Affairs actually took back the affidavit. So it's going to be very interesting to see exactly whether this is a watered-down version of the ministry's stand that the Rohingya Muslims should not be allowed in India, or whether or not they are raising the same stand regarding the security concern and the fact that the Rohingya Muslims should be deported.
And interestingly, Nalini, here there is a number of 40,000 or 45,000 plus Rohingya Muslims who many say are in the country. But then you have the government also saying that a large portion of this 40 to 45,000 Muslims are actually illegal immigrants. They do not have any identity proof per se.
Absolutely. I think the whole issue revolves around whether or not India can accept giving them shelter, even if temporarily for a period of time or not. Because we've also heard arguments regarding how the Rohingya refugees should approach the other Muslim nations, which are also neighboring countries, along with India, for refuge. But despite that fact, we still haven't seen for sure exactly what India is going to do, because despite the fact that they are all illegal immigrants, the fact of the matter is that they are extremely large in numbers. And for India to turn their back away on them completely is going to be an extremely difficult stand to take. But despite that, the Ministry of Home Affairs is making sure that they put this statement out in the open, that they are going to file, they have filed an affidavit, and they also think that allowing the Rohingya Muslims into the country is going to be a security threat. So obviously, it's going to be a human welfare versus national interest kind of a decision that will have to be taken by the Ministry of Home Affairs as well as the central government in the case. Exactly what the Supreme Court will decide is something that we'll know on the 3rd of October when the case comes up next for sure.
All right. And Nalini, we are also standing by, in fact, to get in my editor Niranjan in just a bit. But look at this on the left of your screens. We are putting out, I believe, that affidavit now that has been filed by the centre in this entire case. And yes, what we are given to understand that security, remember, has been the utmost concern here of the government. The government now that has filed its affidavit. And Niranjan, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but if you can, please take us to what the affidavit says. Okay, we'll just connect with Niranjan in a bit, but I believe that it does entail the entire line of thinking. Remember, the security concern, the government says, has been based on intel inputs. You would recall that the government essentially has been saying that the Rohingyas did pose grave security challenges because the government believes that they could be recruited by the terror groups. The reason why, remember, state governments there were asked to identify and deport them. We are putting out excerpts of that affidavit in just a bit for you, Niranjan. I hope you can hear me this time around. Please take us through that entire affidavit now that is with the Supreme Court.
Well, we've accessed the affidavit. I'm just taking you through the details of these these replies that we have accessed here on Republic TV. So the government of India, in its affidavit, I'm going to read out from parts of the affidavit. I hope my video journalists can focus on the affidavit so I can read off parts of it. The government says this is Mukesh Mittal, who's at the Ministry of Home Affairs, has filed his affidavit. He's a respondent. The Union of India is a respondent. The Joint Secretary detailing India's argument in the issue of Rohingyas. The government stand, here he goes on to make a case of why this affidavit is being filed, and it goes on to talk about the position the government will take, saying that he's filing this affidavit to respectfully place on record the legal position emerging from the Constitution of India and leading to the conclusion that the subject matter of the present petition and the prayers prayed for therein would fall within the exclusive domain of executive decision-making policy. So the government essentially saying that this is an issue where they will have to take an executive policy decision and it will have to be justified. He's filing this affidavit in reply only for the limited purpose of satisfying the conscience of this honorable court that this is not a case where the constitutional court of the country, which is essentially the custodian of fundamental rights of Indian citizens. I'm just trying to pull out the operative point as we speak. He's saying, I'm therefore placing only limited facts before the honorable court by way of presenting this affidavit. I, however, reserve my rights to file a further and a detailed affidavit. So, breaking news number one, this is a limited affidavit filed by the government. The government is saying that they are placing only a limited affidavit. It's the initial affidavit with limited facts, and they will further file a detailed affidavit on part of the central government. That is in a few days from now. But he's also going on to detail. In fact, the government also says, my not dealing with the petition para-wise may not be treated as my having admitted the correctness or otherwise of any of the contents thereof. So you can make out, Dipti, that this is a hurriedly drafted affidavit. I'm going to read out parts of it. I respectfully submit that I have placed only those facts in this affidavit which can be placed in public domain. So the government is making a case first, saying that this is an urgent affidavit, this is a limited affidavit with limited facts, also adding that they're only placing those facts which can be placed in public domain, essentially hinting at a security issue. The government also adding that they are refraining from placing other facts in this affidavit which will have a direct bearing on internal security and national security of India. And I'm going to go a little further down to see, yes, I think this is the operative part. The government says, I respectfully submit that as far as the question of deportation of any illegal immigrant is concerned, the question will be as to whether the illegal immigrants in question should be permitted to reside and settle down in the territory of India, and whether a writ petition can be issued under Article 32 by this honorable court having the effect of an illegal immigrant residing in India. So the government making a case, I think that's breaking news, point one, that the government is making, that as far as deportation of any illegal immigrant is concerned, the question will be as to whether the illegal immigrants in question should be permitted to reside and settle down in the territory of India, and whether a writ petition can be issued under Article 32 of the honorable court having the effect of an illegal immigrant residing in India. He also goes on to talk about the custodian of the fundamental rights of the citizens of India, and while exercising its writ jurisdiction under Article 32 of the Constitution, this honorable court would kindly consider Article 19 and 19D and E of the Constitution that reads as under. And the government is making a case, protection of certain rights regarding freedom of speech. All citizens shall have the right to freedom of speech and expression, to assemble peacefully and without arms. In fact, while we pull up these details, let me also go across to Rhythm, I think, who's joining us live. Rhythm was able to get us this affidavit first up. Rhythm, what do you make of this affidavit? If you can just focus on that, focus on pointers, on details of the affidavit. Let's go across to Rhythm and find out how she's reading this reply. Or do we have Nalini? If we can go across to Nalini, Deepthi, either Nalini or Deepthi will be able to put this affidavit in context, because the government essentially is making a case of whether illegal immigrants can be allowed to stay in India. Nalini, what do you make of it?
Yeah. Well, Dharanjan, like we stated previously, this seems to be a more watered-down version of the affidavit that they were originally going to file, considering the fact that they categorically stated that this is the information that they can put out right now in public domain. So, and let's remember last week when they were going to file an affidavit, they had taken a step back at the last moment, clearly stating that they wanted to make some final changes to the affidavit, and only then they were going to file the affidavit. So clearly, they have taken out some information from exactly what was stated in the affidavit before. They've clearly stated that this is the only information that they can be putting out in the public domain. But despite that, the centre continues to take a stand that the Rohingya Muslims are going to be a security threat to the country, and in fact, letting them inside the country and not passing an order leading to their deportation can actually raise up an issue of national interest. So that's the most interesting thing that we are hearing from the Ministry of Home Affairs today. Let's remember the Supreme Court has categorically right now denied issuing a notice either to the central government or in fact to the NHRC. They've stated that they are going to hear the central government stand first. They're going to hear the arguments on the affidavit first, and only then will they allow any notice to be issued to the NHRC. And in addition to that, we've also seen many people actually file impleachment applications today before the Supreme Court, taking a stand. I
think Rhythm is also joining us live. Nalini, let's quickly get in a word from her on how she's reading this affidavit. Rhythm, essentially, if you look at the reply of the government, I'm reading from point 25, it is submitted that due to an already existing large influx of illegal immigrants from the neighboring countries, the demographic profile of some of the bordering states has already undergone a serious change, which is already causing the far-reaching complications in various contexts and is taking its toll and has a direct detrimental effect on the fundamental and basic human rights of countries' own citizens. So essentially the government saying, or rather making an argument against allowing Rohingya Muslims, illegal Rohingya Muslims into the country. Rhythm, I'll leave it to you.
Absolutely, Niranjan. In fact, in the central government's affidavit that has been exclusively accessed by Republic, the most serious concern of the central government is the same like the hashtag Republic is saying, it's security over the Rohingyas. Over and over again in this affidavit that's been filed by the central government, they say security serious concern is in existence. Its more disturbing part is that there's an organized influx of illegal immigrants, and it's observed by the central government. Some Rohingyas are indulging in illegal anti-national activities, the mobilization of funds through Handi Hawala channels, procuring fake fabricated Indian identity documents for other Rohingyas, and also indulging in human trafficking. These are very serious charges, and paragraph 30, Niranjan, is so crucial because it says it's also found by the central government that many of the Rohingyas figure in the suspected sinister designs of ISI, ISIS, and other extremist groups who want to achieve their ulterior motives in India, including that of flaring up communal and sectarian violence in sensitive areas of the country. It says, we submit that the fragile northeast corridor may become further destabilized in case of stridency of Rohingya militancy. And look at the word they've used, Rohingya militancy, which the central government has found to be growing, if permitted to continue. So for all those people playing the humanity card, for the Oasis out there in London, a very strong stand coming in from the central government that is absolutely against the Rohingyas coming into India. They are saying it's a serious potential, a possibility of eruption of violence against the others who are Indian citizens, and they will radicalize by Rohingyas and submit some of the Rohingyas with militant backgrounds also found to be very active in India. They have been identified as a very serious, a very potential threat to internal and national security of India. Keeping this as a background, Niranjan, we have to specify that in this affidavit, the government is absolutely clear that Rohingyas cannot be allowed to be a part of India.
Yes, just going through some of the other points, Rhythm, I just want to bring in Deepti also here. Deepti, I'm going to take you through some of the points. I think from points 25 is the news, is the big headline. If you look at point number 31, I'm just scrolling down to point number 31. 29, I'll start from here. It is observed by the central government that some Rohingyas are indulging in illegal or anti-national activities, that is mobilization of funds through Hawala channels, procuring fake or fabricated Indian identity documents for other Rohingyas, and also indulging in human trafficking. They're also using other illegal network for illegal entry of others in the country. Many of them have managed to acquire fake or fraudulent identity documents like PAN and voter ID cards. It is also found in the central government that many of the Rohingyas figure in the suspected sinister designs of ISI or ISIS and other extremist groups who want to achieve other ulterior motives in India, including that of flaring up communal and sectarian violence in sensitive areas of the country. Page, I think, point 31. Respectfully submit that fragile northeastern corridor may become further destabilized. I think this is a stand. The government says the fragile northeastern corridor may become further destabilized in case of a stridency of Rohingya militancy, which the central government has found to be growing if permitted to continue. There is also a serious potential and possibility of eruption of violence against Buddhists who are Indian citizens who stay on Indian soil by the radicalized Rohingyas. I state and submit that some of the Rohingyas with militant background are also found to be very active in Jammu, Delhi, Hyderabad and Mewat, and have been identified as having a very serious and potential threat to the internal or national security of India. It is respectfully submitted that India is a country with large population, surplus labor force, and has its complex set of own issues. And I think if you look at it, it's clear. It's what we've been talking about, the issue of national security, Deepti, that the government has been saying. As far as some of them are concerned, some of these Rohingyas are concerned, the government says it has reports, it has details, intel of them being a security threat. I think that's the big headline as I hand it over to you.
That's a real point. The reason why we also heard from Kiran Rijiju earlier, who said we don't need lessons from the world and humanity. And he said, that when it comes to the entire debate of humanity versus security, Niranjan, he said for us, the security of the country is paramount. And that's exactly what this affidavit then, Niranjan, is also detailing.
Well, absolutely. If you look at the case that the government is making, point by point, at least 7 to 8 points, 7 to 8 detailed points that the government is talking about. And I'm going to try and focus on these points. That's from point 24 onwards, what the government has said, point by point. You look at, they're quoting from reports. They're talking about, one, of course, the porous borders and how these borders are being misused. Second, that India is already saddled with a very serious problem of illegal migrants attempting to address the situation in the larger interest of the country, keeping national resources in mind. Then secondly, talking about the existing influx of illegal immigrants and the demographic profile of some of the states being changed. And that's one story that we've been talking about here in Republic. The far-reaching complications in various contexts, taking a toll, having a detrimental effect on the fundamental and basic human rights of the country's own citizens. A state in point being Assam and also West Bengal. The government talking about, as far as Rohingyas are concerned, they claim to have entered into India from Myanmar using porous border between India and Myanmar without any valid travel document and illegally. The total number of such illegal immigrants into our country would be more than 40,000. The government putting a number to it, more than 40,000 Rohingyas already on Indian soil. The government adding that they've obviously taken into consideration various factors like the security of the country, the serious security threat and the ramifications. And I think this is one point that the government has made, that as far as the influx of Rohingyas is concerned, they started pouring into Indian territory between 2012 and 13. Central government has contemporaneous from security agency inputs and other authentic material indicating linkages of some of the unauthorized Rohingya militants with Pakistan, Rohingya immigrants with Pakistan-based terror organizations, similar organizations operating in other countries. Over and above the serious said concerns, more disturbing part is that there is an organized influx. I repeat, organized influx of illegal immigrants from Myanmar through agents and touts facilitating illegal immigrants. So one, of course, the government talking about the security concerns. Second, talking about the intel inputs and their operations in Jammu. Third, talking about their links with Pakistan, ISI and ISIS. So essentially the government making a security argument on why Rohingya Muslims should not be allowed.